before Marcus Garvey, before W.E.B. Du Bois, before Pan-Africanism had a name, there was Alexander Crummell, a black minister, scholar, and missionary whose vision for an African Renaissance was born out of struggle, shaped by rejection, and carried across 2 continents. His life tells the story of black hope, black faith, and black disappointment, and it laid the groundwork for Pan-African thought as we know it. Alexander Crummell was born in 1819 in New York City to parents of African descent. His father, Boston Crummell, was reportedly a West African prince who had been enslaved and later freed. His mother was a free woman from Long Island. From an early age, Crummell showed brilliance and ambition. Crummell's parents were both involved in early black activism. His father and mother worked with Freedom's Journal, the first black-owned and operated newspaper in the United States, which was partially operated out of the homes of its contributors. As a child, Alexander was surrounded by political discussion, editorial work, and the power of the written word. This early environment instilled in him a deep awareness of racial injustice and the importance of organized resistance. He also attended a freedmen's school in New York, one of the rare spaces where black children could access formal education. These schools were often underfunded, under constant threat, and fiercely opposed by white mobs. Yet they played a vital role in training the earliest generation of black abolitionists, including Crummell and his close friend Henry Highland Garnet. Before becoming a preacher or scholar, Crummell and Henry Highland Garnet, his childhood friend, were already standing on podiums. In their early 20s, the 2 young men together traveled city to city, giving abolitionist speeches to hostile crowds. Often met with angry white mobs, heckling, and threats of violence, their speeches were acts of courage and defiance. These early years forged a deep bond between them and set the foundation for their lifelong work in racial justice, intellectual thought, and the pursuit of black liberation. Crummell sought to become an Episcopal priest, but racism blocked his path. He was denied admission to the General Theological Seminary in New York due to his race. Worse, when he sought holy orders from Bishop Benjamin T. Onderdonk, the bishop refused, unless Crummell promised never to seek a pulpit in a white church. Crummell rejected the condition and the ordination. This controversy exposed deep racial prejudice within the Episcopal hierarchy. Years later, Onderdonk would be suspended from the church on unrelated charges, but the wound had already been dealt. Crummell eventually trained for ministry in Massachusetts and was ordained by the Diocese of Massachusetts instead. He launched his career with 2 congregations, one in Providence, Rhode Island, and another in Philadelphia. But both efforts were short-lived. The congregation struggled with internal division, lacked resources, and faced white hostility. Disillusioned and isolated, Crummell began to question whether the ministry was truly his calling. It was during this time of doubt that a new opportunity emerged. In 1847, he traveled to England, seeking support for black churches and missions. There, he found new purpose and international respect. He impressed abolitionist audiences with his powerful oratory and moral clarity. He also pursued higher education, earning a degree from Queen's College, Cambridge University, becoming the first known black graduate of Cambridge. Crummell's academic achievement was historic. While in England in the late 1840s, around age 30, Crummell met the renowned abolitionist Frederick Douglass, who was about 5 years his senior. Douglass, already a powerful voice for black liberation, was immediately impressed by Crummell's intellect, eloquence, and deep moral vision. He urged Crummell to return to the United States and lend his talents to the fight for racial justice at home, famously telling him that America needed men like him. But Crummell saw a different calling, one not rooted in America's broken promises, but in Africa's future. Despite Douglass's appeal, Crummell declined, choosing instead to go to Liberia, believing that a new black nation could rise on African soil. In 1853, Alexander Crummell traveled to Liberia with a dream to help build a free black republic rooted in Christian values, moral leadership, and intellectual excellence. He imagined Liberia as the seed of a rising African civilization, led by formerly enslaved African Americans and united with the African people. But the Liberia he found was complicated. The Americo-Liberian elite, descendants of freed U.S. slaves, had built a class-based society that often mirrored the racial divisions they had escaped. Indigenous Africans were marginalized. Power was concentrated among a small settler class. Crummell's sermons called for racial unity and moral reform. He urged the Americo-Liberians to educate, uplift, and embrace native Africans, not rule over them. He established schools, churches, and became a leading voice in the African Civilization Society, which had originally been founded by his close childhood friend, Henry Highland Garnet, in 1858. While Garnet launched the society in the U.S. to promote African immigration and uplift, Crummell expanded its vision in Liberia, infusing it with Pan-African ideals and a missionary emphasis on education and moral reform. One of his most important contributions was his work at Liberia College, where he served as a professor and intellectual leader. He promoted classical education and moral philosophy, aiming to create a new generation of African leaders. However, Crummell faced institutional resistance, limited resources, and internal divisions that stifled progress. The challenges of building lasting institutions in a young republic wore heavily on him. Still, he continued to preach, teach, and write, planting ideas that would take root decades later. Among his most iconic speeches were those delivered at the opening sessions of Liberia College and in the halls of government, where he proclaimed Liberia not merely as a refuge, but as the nucleus of a future African awakening. His orations emphasized moral responsibility, the brotherhood of man, and the duty of educated Africans to uplift the continent. In powerful language, Crummell warned against the arrogance of settler elitism and demanded a more just and inclusive national identity, one that embraced native Africans as equal participants in Liberia's future. In 1863, Crummell delivered a major speech titled "The Responsibility of the First Fathers of a Country for Their Future Life and Destiny." In it, he laid out a powerful argument that the moral and political foundation of a new nation determines its future character and trajectory. He defined two paths a nation might take: one grounded in freedom, virtue, and responsibility, or one defined by repression and decay. He insisted that every generation is a steward, accountable for passing on principles, institutions, and values that uplift future generations. To achieve true national greatness and longevity, Crummell believed, a people must commit to moral discipline and align themselves with divine governance to create a civilization that would last for 1,000 years. During this same period, Crummell also returned to the United States with a young Edward Wilmot Blyden, who would eventually come to be known as the father of Pan-Africanism, on a mission to recruit black settlers willing to emigrate to Liberia. They traveled across several northern cities, speaking at churches and black institutions, advocating for Liberia as a land of promise and opportunity. Their journey was part of a broader campaign to inspire African Americans to consider nation-building abroad as an alternative to continued oppression at home. Crummell's lifelong friend, Henry Highland Garnet, invited him to speak at several events, including large abolitionist gatherings. While Crummell was in Liberia, Garnet built an impressive abolitionist career of his own in America and went on to become one of the most influential and radical voices in the 19th century struggle for black liberation. Born into slavery in 1815 in Newmarket, Maryland, Garnet escaped with his family to New York when he was a child. There, he was exposed to abolitionist ideas early on and received an education at institutions like the African Free School and the Oneida Institute, training grounds for future black intellectuals and activists. Garnet became a Presbyterian minister and quickly emerged as a bold orator. He is perhaps best known for his fiery 1843 speech, an address to the slaves of the United States, delivered at the National Negro Convention. In it, he called for open rebellion and resistance, urging enslaved people to "Let your motto be resistance, resistance, resistance." The speech shocked many abolitionists at the time for its militant tone, but captured the desperation and urgency felt by many black Americans. Throughout his life, Garnet was deeply involved in both religious and political activism. He was an active member of the American Colonization Society and the African Civilization Society, organizations that promoted the idea of black immigration and building prosperous, self-governed communities in Africa. He helped organize black churches, supported anti-slavery organizations, and championed African-American immigration to Liberia as part of a vision for global black self-determination. Garnet made history on February 12, 1865, when he became the first African-American to deliver a sermon in the U.S. House of Representatives. This opportunity came after Garnet personally met with President Abraham Lincoln to request the chance to speak. Lincoln, impressed by Garnet's leadership and moral authority, approved the request, making the unprecedented appearance possible. It was a symbolic and profound moment, reflecting both Garnet's influence and the shifting tides of history as the nation neared the end of the Civil War. In 1881, Garnet was appointed U.S. Minister to Liberia, making him the first African-American to hold such a diplomatic post. Their reunion was both personal and symbolic. Two childhood friends, now mature leaders, once again standing side by side to address black audiences about the future. Their message was met with both interest and skepticism. Some black leaders remained deeply committed to building equality in the United States, while others were drawn to Crummell's Pan-African vision of a new beginning in Africa. Later, on July 26, 1870, Liberia's Independence Day, Crummell delivered another powerful address. In this speech, he articulated a clear vision of national stewardship, while harshly criticizing the Liberian elite for their discrimination against indigenous Africans. He warned that moral decay and national decline would follow if they failed to embrace justice, inclusion, and unity with the native populations. Disillusioned by the political leadership and disappointed by the direction the country was taking, Crummell decided after nearly 20 years in Africa that his mission in Liberia had come to an end. He soon left the country and returned to the United States, carrying with him both the wisdom and the wounds of his African experience. By 1873, Alexander Crummell was 54 years old. He had spent nearly 2 decades in Liberia fighting for an African future, and now returned to a United States that was undergoing reconstruction, but also beginning to abandon the promise of black freedom. Despite the disappointment of Liberia's direction, Crummell was not finished. The next 25 years of his life would be devoted to building black institutions in America, shaping public thought, and mentoring the next generation of African leaders. Upon his return, Crummell accepted a pastoral call to establish a church in Washington, D.C. In 1875, he founded St. Luke's Episcopal Church, the first independent black Episcopal parish in the city. The church became a hub for political and intellectual discussion, attracting black professionals, educators, and leaders. Crummell's sermons addressed not only spiritual matters, but also civil rights, education, and racial unity. Today, St. Luke's still stands as a testament to his vision and resilience. Crummell's return also reunited him with Frederick Douglass, now one of the most prominent black figures in the country. Though their approaches sometimes differed, Crummell more conservative and religious, Douglass more fiery and radical, they shared a common mission: black advancement through dignity, education, and determination. Crummell often spoke at events alongside Douglass and other key figures of the era, adding philosophical depth and moral clarity to the public conversation. But Crummell's influence extended far beyond the pulpit. He began writing essays, pamphlets, and delivering lectures that shaped the ideological foundations of what would later be known as Pan-Africanism. He argued for racial solidarity across the diaspora and encouraged African Americans to see themselves as part of a global black family. His experience in Liberia gave him unique insight into the challenges of building black-led nations, and he never abandoned the dream of African Renaissance. Though Crummell was not a politician, his political connections were significant. Through his church and academic work, he cultivated relationships with lawmakers, educators, and black political leaders in Washington, D.C. His influence in black intellectual circles helped shape early civil rights discourse, and his voice carried weight in debates over education policy, church autonomy, and the role of African Americans in public life. During this time, Crummell also found himself at odds with the rising influence of Booker T. Washington. Crummell criticized Washington's emphasis on vocational training and political accommodation, warning that it risked undermining the long-term pursuit of full civil rights and higher education for African Americans. Crummell advocated instead for a more rigorous intellectual foundation, led by morally upright, classically educated leaders who could elevate the race through both character and scholarship. In the 1880s and 1890s, Crummell became a mentor to young intellectuals, including W.E.B. Du Bois, who deeply admired him. Crummell's emphasis on education, self-discipline, and moral excellence would influence Du Bois' concept of the talented tenth, the belief that a leadership class of educated black men and women could lift the race. Crummell also helped organize the American Negro Academy in 1897, one of the first major institutions dedicated to black scholarly work. Its mission was to promote literature, science, and art by and for African Americans. At its founding, Crummell, then nearly 80 years old, served as its first president. Though his health began to decline, Crummell never retired from public service. He preached, taught, and wrote until the very end. When he died in 1898 at the age of 79, he left behind more than institutions. He left a worldview, one that called black people to moral excellence, historical awareness, and a global sense of purpose. Alexander Crummell's later life reminds us that visionaries do not fade, they evolve, and even when their dreams are deferred, they plant seeds that others will water in seasons yet to come. Thanks for watching. If you found this story insightful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue uncovering the hidden truths of history. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see you in the next video.